Welcome to another web development video on this channel. In this video, I will show you how easy it is to write a Gulp plugin using some helpers. As a prerequisite, I'd assume that you're roughly familiar with JavaScript and also that you've worked with Gulp before. Also, I would suggest you watch the other videos in this series so you get a little bit more context of what we're doing here. Now, let's jump right into it. So first of all, why write now on Gulp plugin when there are so many Gulp plugins out there already for nearly everything you want to do? But there are times where you want to do something special and there might not be a plugin, so it's good to know how to do it. Also, it's just interesting to understand how things work. And now we only used plugins, but it's also interesting to learn how this actually works. And this is what we're going to tackle now. In this tutorial, will be a little bit more superficial, so just using some helpers to create plugins, but I'll also do a video where I go a little more in depth into how node streams work and also how Gulp makes use of them. First, let's decide for what we want to use the plugin. So as I said in previous videos, the pages in the homepage currently look quite ugly. So if we look here, the formatting is very bad. So what I want to do is, after I have this nunjucks rendering complete, I want to apply some code formatting. And for this, I could now just search for some Beautify plugin for Gulp, or I could just search for an NPM package that does it and then write the plugin around it myself, which is what I do and what I'm going to show you now. So the NPM package I want to use is this pretty package, which says that it uses JS Beautify and has some tweaks or settings already applied to it. So this plugin really has just one option here, which is OCD true. All else is basically the preferences of the author, and I had a look at it and it puts out quite beautifully formatted code. So I want to use this one, and yeah, I didn't find a Gulp plugin for it. So this is what we're gonna write. Now, for writing a Gulp plugin, you could use the Node API for node streams directly, or what we're gonna do in this tutorial, we use another NPM package which is called Through2. So the naming is not ideal in my opinion. So there was a version which was called Through, which was doing this wrapping. Now they have Through2. And this basically makes the implementation of such a node streams, so transform streams, in this case easier than using the direct Node API. But as I said, I will have another tutorial where I go a little deeper on how node streams work, and there I'll also show a bit more how you would write a real node stream plugin. So what is this Through2? It's just providing some factory methods which you can use to create those node streams for you. What you do, you pass in a callback function, which has again a callback here and also a chunk in this case. The chunk is basically the data which you can then work on. And in the Gulp case, as we'll soon see, the chunk is not data. Chunk is actually a file, or how they call it, a vinyl object. Now let's install both npm install pretty and npm install Through2. And now we also include both in our Gulp file.js. So at the top, const Through2 require and require for pretty. Now to use this Through2, what we can do here, we can directly use a pipe or first write a function which we want to call with the Through2, so the callback function which you saw, this function here. Let's just write this one. And we'll not call this one chunk because, as I said, in the Gulp case, we're working on files or vinyl objects, which are basically wrappers around files. So you have some variables specifying where the file is coming from, and then very important for us, the contents, which is a buffer containing the actual data on which we can now work in our plugin. Now let's first give this function a name and then make use of the contents of the file which we just saw. So file contents gives us access to a data buffer containing whatever was currently processed. So if we, for example, pipe this after the nunjucks render, then this is the markup which comes out of the renderer, but as a buffer. And what pretty needs is a string with the markup. So we convert it to a string, and now we can pass it to pretty. And we want to also use this OCD true option, which basically gets rid of white spaces and condenses everything. So OCD true. Now what this returns is the condensed string with the markup. And what we can do with that, we assign it to the contents of the file. But before we can do so, we have to again transform it to a buffer. So we call buffer from, and yeah, this one-liner basically does everything we need. You could also do other stuff. So if you get access to the contents, to the string, you could have your own algorithm, your own transformations, whatever you need to do. In the end, you just convert it again to a buffer and assign it to the contents. Now, aside from this first parameter, this file, what we also have to use is this callback here. So we call it and we pass in null, and as second parameter, we pass in the file. And this is used to give back the data, the vanilla object, into the pipe, and from there it can take its way further down the pipe towards the destination. Now to use this callback function, what we have to do down here is we pipe it, and in this pipe what we pass in is basically the factory method Through2, which receives our callback function. So it's a nice callback chain here, but it's not that bad in the end. And now this Through2 will not work properly because we're not working on chunks here, we're working on actual objects. So what we're gonna do is there's another factory method which is called object, and this is what we need to call. This is what we need to use to pass our callback function to. We do the same down here. And yeah, now we're ready to test this. Let's call gulp. Good thing, it ran through. And now let's have a look at the index. Scroll up a bit. So here you see the formatting looks quite good. Nicely idented. The only thing here, PHP never works with Beautify, but that's okay. The rest looks fine. Only down here we still have a lot of new lines and white spaces. So this pretty plugin wasn't able to take care of that, but otherwise this file looks already very good. And yeah, in the next part I also show you how to get rid of those here, of those white spaces, new lines. This is actually possible directly in Nunjucks, and you do this by some white space control settings. But first let's reiterate over what we've just done here. So writing a plugin for Gulp, very simple. You just need to write this callback function here, which gets 3 parameters, of which you just need the first and the last one. And the first one gives you access to the contents. So wherever you put the pipe, where you use your plugin, whatever the contents look till then, this is what you access. You access it as a buffer, which you can convert to a string. Then you can do some stuff to it, some processing. Then you convert it back to a buffer, assign it again to the contents, and then you call the callback with it, pass it back to the pipe, and on we go. Now to get rid of all the new lines and white spaces that are still there, the first thing we can do, we can use some additional env options. And I'll just show you those two settings, which are trim blocks and Airstrip blocks. So this basically strips the white spaces on the left side of blocks. Let me quickly show you what this means. When you have a block like here in this insert spaces, so this for loop here, this is basically a block, and in this block you have this NBSP, this single white space. To the left of it, there are also, due to the formatting, some white spaces. And those are stripped by setting those options. Let's just have a look what happens, but first copy those options down to the HTML part, run gulp, and have another look at the index. Now, it didn't do too much, so basically only this first white space or NBSP was moved up now. Before it was in a new line, so it was basically sitting here. Now it moved up, but yet still not what we want. There's still a lot of new lines which we want to get rid of. So what we have to do here, we have to use white space control. And I can show you this. So all those new lines and white spaces basically come from our looping here in this link item list. So we have many blocks here. For example, this if-else block, this all introduces white spaces. And what we can do to remove those, in each of those blocks, what we do here before the end % curly brace we put a minus, which basically tells it remove all the white spaces coming here. And then here on the end, or on the beginning of the next syntax here, we also put a minus. Then again, we put a minus here, then down here minus, and before the end if a minus. And in my opinion, we could always use this syntax. So not just using curly braces %, but just also inserting the minus just to make sure we don't have additional white spaces, which by the way only happen because we have this fancy formatting here. If we would write everything in a single line without anything formatted here, we wouldn't have this problem. And same as we did this white space control here in the loop, we also have to do it in this insert spaces. So basically putting a minus here and here. So those are also removed. Now if we run Gulp again, the index will look much better. So let's have a look down here. Now this looks nice. So we have everything in one line, then the next href, and then again href. So this formatting is now really looking pretty. So I don't need to do anything more, I think. Which brings us to the end of this tutorial. So I hope you liked it. So you saw how easy it is to write a plugin for Gulp, and also how you can use whitespace control to make the formatting of your nunchucks generated HTML markup a little more condensed, so you don't have all those additional white spaces and new lines. So the combination of both gives you a really clean output. And yeah, if you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and yeah, see you in the next video.